On the Democratic side, you have all of these little fractured groups of people, right? You have Black people, Latino people, LGBTQ community, and every single one of them has essentially been conditioned to hyper-focus on social policies that specifically apply to them and benefit them.
In this video, Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks reacts to clips from Andrew Schulz interviewing Bernie Sanders. Andrew Schulz asked Bernie about his stance on identity politics. With that, let's see what Anna Kasparian thinks of Andrew Schulz and Bernie's exchange.
They started to label us the podcast bros and said that we were sexist and we were racist and bigoted. It's almost like it's the exact same strategy to get you out of there.
And then you get to what we call identity politics.
Yeah.
You're Black, you're wonderful, you're tremendous, you're gay, you're the greatest human being on earth.
Yeah.
And rather than say, what do you stand for?
We felt that over the last 4 elections, Democrats, we felt that we didn't have a say on who could be president.
There hasn't been a fair primary for the Democrats since 2008. Are they not also a threat to democracy? Yes. We often hear...
Fair enough. This is a good discussion.
Why are you shocked?
I'm shocked because you're asking questions that are not often asked.
Senator Bernie Sanders is catching a ton of heat over his views on the Democratic Party's treatment of our system of government, democracy, how we run our elections, which was the centerpiece, by the way, of the Democrats' 2024 election cycle. But before we see all of that commentary from Senator Sanders and what the fuss is all about, I do want to just quickly touch on what he had to say about identity politics. First, the context though, Cenk, because 2015, 2016, Bernie Sanders was but he was different from 2020 Bernie Sanders. 2020 Bernie Sanders, I feel that he felt he had no choice but to infuse his campaign with the identity politics in order to, keep the identity obsessed off his back when, he wants to focus on the bread and butter economic issues that honestly appeals to a much broader base of voters. But nonetheless, let's take a look at how that part of the conversation went down.
I have to give credit where credit is due. I hate to do it, but Bernie Sanders talking about identity politics, that was a great description of it. If you're Black, you're wonderful. If you're gay, you can't do anything wrong. And not looking at the individual, and that's all we preach on the right. But it's so funny. I'm sitting here praising him for saying that. And they say he's catching heat from Democrats. Just how crazy is that? What did he say that was incorrect? I will say, though, AOC loves identity politics. So it'll be interesting to see, So I feel like this long romance that Bernie and AOC have had as they travel the country in a private jet, drinking champagne, I would think this identity politics conversation would have to come up between the two of them and come to a head at some point, because if that's really how Bernie feels, he is a far cry away from one of the queens of identity politics. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
We have a question we want to ask about what happened to you in 2016 with this Bernie Bros movement, where your followers are seeing they have a racism problem, a misogyny problem. Do you think that's a super PAC thing behind that?
That was the Democratic establishment.
During this election, the podcast space, which the Democrats largely avoided, they feel had some influence in the election, and they started to label us the podcast bros and said that we were sexist and we were racist and bigoted. It's almost like it's the exact same strategy to get you out of there.
Yeah, that's what the liberal elite China does. And then you get to what we call identity politics.
Yeah.
That you're Black, you're wonderful, you're tremendous, you're gay, you're the greatest human being on earth.
Yeah.
And rather than say, what do you stand for?
Exactly.
You're gay, that's fine, who cares?
Yeah.
But what do you stand for?
I love that Senator Sanders focused on, the content of someone's character, what someone stands for politically speaking, what their objectives are, when they're pursuing a position of power, because that does matter the most. It absolutely matters the most. The identity politics situation is so dumb because what it does is, Waz talks about this so perfectly. I can't articulate it as well as he does, but it just gives you this illusion of actually moving toward progress for marginalized groups of people in this country, when in reality, we're talking about elite people who get to enjoy positions of power, but they think exactly the same as the neoliberals, even the neoconservatives that have destroyed this country.
Yeah. So this Bernie interview is a Rorschach test and it's a litmus test. So let me explain how it's both. Rorschach, in that when you look at it,
if you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
you can see it depending on your perspective very differently, right? We look at it and we go, oh, that's obviously true, right? Oh, and thank God he's finally saying it, because we were worried that between 2020 and now he had not been saying it, right? But he's taking a bolder stance against identity politics and against the Democratic establishment. Now, as a person who's populist left, the economic wing of Bernie movement, that to me is perfect. It's manna from heaven, right? So, but for the establishment, it's very clear. They love identity politics. I'm gonna explain in a second why they love it so much. So they hate it, right? I now see like the rad libs or whatever they call it.
Yeah, rad libs is perfect.
Right.
Yes.
So those folks who are like, no, Biden's the youngest person in America. He's an infant. Kamala Harris is the greatest candidate that's ever happened. She would have won 50 states if it wasn't for blah, 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 the rascally kids. And so for those, the crazed Democrats that like got trained and brainwashed on MSNBC that have now come online, right? Mm-hmm. So for those guys, they hate it. They look at the Rorschach test and they go, ugly old woman. I don't want it. He criticizing Democrats and our beloved identity politics. I hate that guy, right? So that's easy. To me, what I'm curious about, and I'm genuinely curious, I don't know, I mean, you might have a better sense of it, but we're mainly gonna see it in the reaction going forward, right? Is what do our friends on the far left think, right? Because so a lot of them are economic populists like us. There's a lot of overlap, right? They should not be pro-establishment. I mean, if you're far left, you shouldn't want anything to do with the establishment, right? So, but are they so wedded to identity?
You know, when they were mentioning podcast bros and the Bernie bros, I was just thinking the other day, I was like, God, I hear everyone like attaching bros to things lately. Like, what does that mean exactly? So I started thinking about the different contexts. And it definitely is a left-wing term. I think it's a pushback on masculinity, as if masculinity is dumb. They're trying to take the piss a little bit out of masculinity by saying, "Oh, are you like a mega bro, dude?" You know, something like that. That I don't know. That's a bad example, probably. But so I think to them, masculinity and someone who's a bro, like a frat guy kind of thing, I think in their eyes, that's someone who is inherently racist, homophobic, misogynistic, the whole kit and caboodle. But all they did was change the way they implement it by calling people bros. I mean, think really hard, like, what have the Democrats accomplished in recent years? What's their strategy or their plan to improve the lives for American people? They don't have any of those things. The one play they constantly use is you're sexist, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're whatever. And they've attached that to Donald Trump. They don't call him bro Trump or whatever, but I guarantee they've used the term like MAGA bros before, and so by association, they suggest that anyone who supports Donald Trump is racist, sexist, misogynistic. Identity politics is the foundation of the Democrat playbook. Anyway, let's wrap it up.
Politics that they're going to join the rad libs and go, no, since Bernie's not doing identity politics, we're out. I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
Jake, I think they're the same people. I think they're the same groups of people, okay? So these are individuals, and look, there's the Democratic establishment that has an interest in leaning into the identity politics, essentially fracturing the Democratic base based on identity, which makes it even more difficult to work together as a broad coalition that pushes for economic prosperity in this country. Because think about how things have been playing out over the last decade, for instance, right? On the Democratic side, you have all of these little fractured groups of people, right? You have Black people, Latino people, LGBTQ community, and every single one of them has essentially been conditioned to hyper-focus on social policies that specifically apply to them and benefit them.
And it's not just
Well said, Anna. But we want to hear from you. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about this conversation that Anna and Cenk just had about the Andrew Schulz, Bernie Sanders interview? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, as always, really appreciate you watching, and we will see you in the next one.